Captain Hana sat in her command chair on the bridge of the Star Whisper. The lights were dim, and the only sounds came from the soft beeping of machines. She had been on patrol duty for 3 months now, watching empty space for any signs of trouble. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The Galactic Council needed ships like hers to keep watch over the outer edges of known space. Most of the time, nothing happened. Pirates were rare these days, and most alien species knew better than to cause problems near Council space. Hana was reading reports on her datapad when the communications officer spoke up. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on the emergency channels." "What kind of strange?" Hana asked, not looking up from her reports. "It's a distress signal, but it's not coming from any known species. The signal is rough, like it was made by someone who doesn't know proper communication rules." Hana put down her pad and walked over to the communications station. The officer, a young man named Quan, was frowning at his screen. "Show me," she said. Quan pressed a few buttons and suddenly the bridge filled with static. Through the noise, Hana could hear a voice. It was speaking in a language she had never heard before, but her ship's computer was already working to translate. This is June of the Human Defense Force. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Our world is Terra, coordinates attached. We need help. The enemy ships are alive like giant bugs. They eat everything they touch. We have been fighting for 6 days. Our weapons work, but there are so many of them. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help." The message repeated several times before cutting to static again. Hana looked at Quan, who was already running scans on the signal. "Computer says the message comes from a star system about 50 light-years from here," Quan said. "The system isn't on any of our maps. No records of contact with any species called humans either." Hana felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard stories about the Void Swarm, though most people thought they were just scary tales. Ships that looked like giant insects eating entire worlds before moving on to the next one. The Council had never found proof they were real. "Captain," called out another officer from the scanning station, "I'm picking up something else. Energy readings from that system are off the charts. Lots of explosions, weapon fire. Someone is definitely fighting a war out there." Hana walked back to her command chair and pressed the button that would connect her to Council headquarters. Within minutes, she was talking to Admiral Bin, the head of the Council Defense Fleet. "Admiral, we've received a distress signal from an unknown species. They claim to be under attack by what sounds like the Void Swarm." Admiral Bin's face appeared on the main screen. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been fighting space pirates and dealing with border disputes for 30 years. "Captain Hana, you know as well as I do that the Void Swarm is just a story. Probably some new alien species having a civil war. These humans probably just discovered space travel and are fighting among themselves. Sir, the energy readings suggest a massive battle, and they specifically mentioned ships that eat everything they touch." Admiral Bin sighed. "Even if it is the Void Swarm, which I doubt, we can't risk Council ships on some unknown species in the middle of nowhere. We have our own people to protect. But sir, if the Void Swarm is real and we don't help, they might move on to Council space next." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Hana could see him thinking, weighing the risks. Finally, he spoke. "Take your ship and 2 others. Go look, but don't get involved in any fighting. If this Void Swarm is real, I want to know about it. If it's just primitives fighting each other, come back and we'll forget this ever happened." The connection ended and Hana turned to her crew. "You heard the Admiral. Set course for the Terra. System, maximum speed." As the Star Whisper jumped to light speed, Hana couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something bigger than anyone expected. She had read the old reports about missing colonies and empty worlds found on the edge of space. Maybe there was something to those Void Swarm stories after all. The journey took 2 days. As they got closer to the Terra system, the ship's sensors picked up more and more signs of battle. Energy blasts, explosions, and the wreckage of destroyed ships filled space around the human world. "Captain?" Quan called out. "I'm getting another transmission from the humans. This time the voice was different. A woman named Ray was speaking. "This is Dr. Ray of the Human Research Division. We have been studying the enemy forces. They are biological ships, controlled by a hive mind. We have found ways to hurt them, but we need allies. We know you are out there. We can see your ships on our scanners. Please respond." Hana was surprised. These humans had detected her ships from a distance that should have been impossible with primitive technology. "Captain?" The scanning officer called out. "You need to see this." The main screen changed to show the Terra system. What Hana saw made her heart stop. Hundreds of massive black shapes moved through space around a small blue and green world. The shapes looked like giant insects with wings made of metal and flesh. They were attacking the human planet with beams of energy that turned everything they touched into dust. But the humans were fighting back. Small silver ships darted between the alien monsters, firing weapons that actually seemed to hurt them. Explosions bloomed across the dark hulls of the enemy ships, and some of the monsters were actually falling back. "Impossible," whispered one of her officers. "No one has ever successfully fought the Void Swarm." Hana watched as a group of human ships surrounded one of the enemy monsters. Instead of running away when it turned to attack them, the human ships flew straight at it. Some were destroyed, but others made it through and began firing at close range. The monster writhed and finally exploded in a ball of green fire. "Get me a direct line to Admiral Bin," Hana ordered. "He needs to see this." As her crew worked to establish the connection, Hana kept watching the battle. These humans were not just surviving against the Void Swarm, they were actually winning. Fights against individual ships. She had never seen anything like it. The distress signal had been wrong about one thing. These humans weren't asking for rescue. They were asking for allies in a war they already knew how to fight. Captain Hana had seen many strange things during her years in space, but nothing had prepared her for what she was watching now. Through the Star Whisper's main view screen, she could see human soldiers in metal suits flying through the vacuum of space without ships. They were using small rockets attached to their backs to move between the giant black creatures that made up the Void Swarm. "Captain," said Quan from the communications station, "the humans are trying to talk to us again." "Put them through," Hana replied, unable to look away from the battle. A man's voice came through the speakers. He sounded calm, even though explosions were going off all around him. "This is Major Saul of the Human Space Marine Corps. We can see your ships watching us. Are you here to help or just to look?" Hana hesitated. Admiral Bin had told her not to get involved in any fighting, but these humans were doing something that should have been impossible. They were boarding enemy ships and fighting hand-to-hand with the Void Swarm. "This is Captain Hana of the Galactic Council ship Star Whisper. We received your distress signal. We're here to observe and report back to our leaders." "Observe all you want," Saul replied. "But if you're going to stay, try not to get in our way. We've got work to do." Hana watched as Sul and his soldiers landed on the hull of one of the massive black ships. The surface of the enemy vessel seemed to be alive, covered in what looked like scales and breathing holes. The human soldiers began cutting through the hull with bright energy saws. "They're actually boarding a Void Swarm ship," whispered the scanning officer. "No one has ever done that and lived." Within minutes, explosions began appearing inside the alien vessel. The massive ship started to twist and shake, as if it were in pain. Green fluid leaked from the holes the humans had cut in its hull. "Captain," Quan called out, "I'm getting a transmission from inside that ship. It's Major Saul." "We're inside the beast." Saul's voice crackled through the static. "The whole thing is alive, just like our intelligence said. Walls are made of some kind of living metal. We're finding the nerve centers now. Once we cut the right connections, this thing should stop moving." 5 minutes later, the massive alien ship went dark and began drifting in space. The humans had killed it from the inside. "Incredible," Hana muttered. She activated the communicator again. "Major Saul, how did you know where to cut?" "We've been fighting these things for months," Saul replied as he and his team flew back toward their own ships. "Every time we kill one, we learn more about how they work. Dr. Ray has been studying their biology. She knows more about these monsters than anyone." "We would like to speak with Dr. Ray," Hana said, "and we'd like to come aboard." One of your ships, if that's possible. There was a pause. I'll have to check with command. Stand by. While they waited, Hana watched more human tactics. She saw human ships that looked like they were built from scrap metal and spare parts fighting alongside sleek military vessels. Some of the human ships were so damaged they should have been falling apart, but they kept fighting. One human ship caught her attention. It was tiny compared to the alien monsters, but it flew straight at them without fear. As she watched, the small ship extended what looked like a giant metal claw and grabbed onto one of the alien vessels. Then it began spinning, using its engines, to make the much larger alien ship spin with it. "What are they doing?" asked one of her officers. The answer came when both ships crashed into a second alien vessel. The explosion was enormous, destroying all three ships. The human pilot had used his own ship as a weapon. "Captain," Quan interrupted her thoughts. "Dr. Ray is responding. She's inviting us to come aboard their research station." An hour later, Hana and two of her officers were in a shuttle, flying toward a human space station that orbited their planet. The station looked like it had been built quickly from whatever materials were available. Parts of it were clearly made from destroyed alien ships. Dr. Ray met them at the docking bay. She was a small woman with short black hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple gray uniform that was stained with what looked like alien blood. "Welcome to Research Station Alpha," Ray said as she led them through narrow corridors. "Sorry about the mess. We've been a bit busy lately." The station was crowded, with human soldiers and scientists. Everyone seemed to be working on something urgent. Hana saw rooms full of alien body parts being studied, weapons being modified, and humans in medical beds being treated for injuries. "How long have you been fighting the Void Swarm?" Hana asked. "About 8 months," Ray replied. "We detected them coming toward our system 2 years ago. We've been preparing for this war ever since." She led them into a large room filled with tanks of green liquid. Inside the tanks, Hana could see pieces of the alien ships floating in the fluid. "This is where we study them," Ray explained. "Every piece we can salvage from destroyed ships comes here. We've learned that they're not just machines. They're living creatures, bred for war and controlled by a hive mind." Ray walked over to one tank that contained what looked like a brain the size of a human head. "This is a control node. Each ship has several of them. If you can destroy enough nodes, the ship dies. That's how our boarding teams know where to attack." "But how do you survive boarding them?" asked one of Hana's officers. "The conditions inside those ships must be deadly." Ray smiled grimly. "You have to understand something about humans. We come from a world that tries to kill us every day. Our planet has storms that can level cities, animals that hunt in packs, and diseases that can kill millions. We've learned to adapt." She led them to a window that looked out at the human planet below. Even from space, Hana could see that the world was different from other planets she had visited. The continents were covered with what looked like metal structures, and the oceans glowed with an unnatural blue light. "Our world made us strong," Ray continued. "We learned to fight, to build, to survive when everything else dies. When we detected the Void Swarm coming, we didn't panic, we prepared." "But surely you must want help from the Council," Hana said. "You can't fight them alone forever." Ray turned to look at her directly. "Captain, we're not asking for rescue. We're asking for allies. We know how to fight these things. We know how to kill them. What we need are partners who can help us take the fight to their home worlds." "Home worlds?" Hana felt a chill. "You mean there are more of them?" "Lots more," Ray said quietly. "The ships attacking us are just scouts. The main swarm is still coming. According to our calculations, they have enough ships to consume every inhabited world in this part of the galaxy." Ray walked over to a computer terminal and brought up a star map. Red dots marked dozens of star systems. "These are the worlds they've already destroyed. We found this information in the memory banks of captured ships. The pattern is always the same. They send scouts first, then the main swarm arrives and consumes everything." Hana stared at the map. Many of the red dots were close to Council space. Why didn't the Council know about this? "Because they never leave survivors," Ray replied. "We're the first world that's fought back successfully. We're the first to learn their patterns and weaknesses. But we can't stop them alone." As if to Prove her point. Alarms suddenly began ringing throughout the station. Through the window, Hana could see new shapes appearing in space. More alien ships were arriving, and these were bigger than the ones they had been fighting. The shuttle that took Captain Hana down to the human planet's surface was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was built like a tank with wings, covered in thick armor that showed marks from many battles. The human pilot, a woman named Sergeant Mira, flew it like she was expecting to be shot at any moment. "Welcome to Earth," Mira said as they broke through the clouds. "Try not to stare too much. I know it's not what most aliens expect." Hana looked out the window and gasped. The planet below her was covered with metal structures that stretched as far as she could see. Cities that looked like massive fortresses dotted the landscape, connected by raised roads that were clearly built to be defended. The oceans glowed with a blue light that came from underwater factories, and the sky was filled with flying machines that moved in careful patterns. "This is all for the war?" Hana asked. "This is just how we live," Mira replied. "Earth isn't a nice place, Captain. Our weather can kill you, our animals hunt in packs, and our diseases are deadly. We learned to build strong or die young, the DU." Shuttle landed at what Mira called Central Command, a massive building that rose from the ground like a metal mountain. As they walked through the hallways, Hana saw humans of all ages working on weapons, studying battle plans, and training for combat. Even the children she saw were learning to use tools that could be weapons. General Nam met them in a room filled with screens showing battles happening all across the star system. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his face that suggested he had seen many fights. "Captain Hana," he said, shaking her hand with a grip that was stronger than she expected. "Dr. Ray tells me you're here to observe. Good. I want your council to understand what they're dealing with." General Nam pressed a button, and the screens around the room changed to show a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked worlds that had been destroyed by the Void Swarm, and yellow dots showed worlds that were currently under attack. "The Swarm has been moving through this galaxy for over 100 years, Nam explained. "They follow the same pattern, every time. Send scouts to study a world's defenses, then send the main fleet to consume everything. No world has ever survived a full Swarm attack." "Except Earth," Hana said. Nam smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Earth is different. We knew. They were coming long before they arrived. We've been preparing for this war for decades." He pressed another button and the screens changed to show the construction of massive underground factories. Humans worked day and night to build weapons, ships, and defensive systems. "We turned our entire world into a weapon," Nam continued. "Every city is a fortress. Every factory makes tools of war. Every citizen knows how to fight. When the Swarm scouts arrived, we were ready for them." Hana watched footage of the first battles. Human ships that looked crude compared to Council. Vessels fought with a ferocity she had never seen. Instead of trying to avoid damage, the human pilots flew straight at their enemies, using their ships as weapons when their guns ran out of ammunition. "But the scouts were just the beginning," Nam said. "The main Swarm fleet is still coming. Our calculations show they'll be here in 6 months. When they arrive, they'll bring 1,000 times more ships than we've fought so far." Hana felt her blood go cold. 1,000 times more? "That's why we need allies," Nam said. "Not to rescue us, but to help us take the fight to them before they can spread to other worlds." Chief Technician Yule entered the room carrying a piece of metal that seemed to shift and change color as he moved. "General, the latest shield of steel components are ready for testing." Nam nodded and turned to Hana. "Would you like to see what we've built from the remains of our enemies?" They took a transport to a massive construction site on the edge of the city. Hana saw thousands of humans working on a structure that seemed to stretch up into the sky. It was made from metal that she recognized as being from Void Swarm ships, but the humans had changed it somehow. "This is one of our planetary defense stations," Yule explained. "We call the whole network the Shield of Steel. It's built from every piece of Swarm technology we could salvage." The structure was enormous, with weapons that pointed in all directions. But what impressed Hana most was how the humans had improved on the alien technology. The living metal of the Swarm ships had been combined with human engineering to create something entirely new. "The Swarm builds their ships to consume and destroy," Yule continued. We've learned to turn that same technology into a shield. These stations can repair themselves, adapt to different weapons, and coordinate their defenses across the entire planet. As they toured the facility, Hana met Dr. Jin, a human strategist who had spent years studying every battle the swarm had ever fought. Jin showed her detailed maps of swarm movements, patterns of attack, and weaknesses that no other species had ever discovered. The swarm thinks they're hunting us, Jin explained, but we've been hunting them right back. Every scout ship they send, we capture some of their crew alive. Every battle they fight, we record and analyze. We know more about the swarm than they know about themselves. Jin led her to a room where human soldiers were training to fight in the vacuum of space. They moved with a grace and speed that seemed impossible, working together like they could read each other's minds. Your people fight very differently from other species, Hana observed. We fight like a pack, Jin replied. On Earth, the species that survive are the ones that work together. We learned that if we don't support each other, we all die. As the day continued, Hana met more humans who showed her different aspects of their war machine. She saw factories that ran day and night, powered by energy sources that the humans had built from studying swarm power systems. She saw schools where children learned mathematics alongside weapon maintenance. She saw hospitals where doctors studied alien biology to find new ways to hurt the enemy. But what struck her most was the attitude of the humans. They weren't afraid. They weren't desperate. They were angry. You have to understand, General Nam explained as they returned to Central Command. The swarm made a mistake when they chose to attack Earth. They thought we were just another weak species that would fall easily. Instead, they attacked a world full of predators who have been waiting for a worthy enemy. That evening, as Hana prepared to return to her ship, Admiral Bin's face appeared on the communication screen. She could see the concern in his eyes as she described what she had learned. Admiral, she said, these humans aren't asking for our help because they're losing. They're asking for our help because they want to win completely. They want to destroy the swarm entirely. And you think they can do it? Admiral Bin asked. Hana looked out the window at the glowing factories and defensive stations that covered the human world. In the distance, she could see human ships launching into space to continue the fight. Admiral, I think they're the only ones who can do it. The question is whether we're brave enough to help them. As she spoke, alarms began ringing again. New swarm ships had been detected approaching the system. But instead of looking worried, General Nam smiled. Captain, would you like to stay and watch how we welcome uninvited guests to our home? The main swarm fleet arrived at Earth like a storm made of nightmares. Captain Hana watched from the bridge of the Star Whisper as hundreds of massive black ships emerged from the darkness of space. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons that pulsed with green energy. My God, whispered one of her officers. There are so many of them. But the humans were ready. As the swarm fleet moved toward Earth, the planet's defenses came alive. The shield of steel stations that Hana had seen being built now revealed their true purpose. Beams of energy reached across space, connecting the stations in a web of light that surrounded the entire world. This is Colonel Day of the Human Orbital Defense Corps, came a voice over the communication system. All council ships, please. Move to safe distance. We're about to show these bugs why they should have stayed home. Hana had expected the humans to wait for the swarm to attack first. Instead, she watched as human ships launched from every part of Earth's surface. They didn't fly in neat formations like council fleets. They moved like a swarm of their own, each ship following its own path but somehow working together. Captain Wu commanded one of the strangest ships Hana had ever seen. It looked like someone had taken a cargo transport and covered it with armor and weapons. As the swarm ships approached, Wu's vessel flew straight at the largest enemy ship. This is Cargo Runner 7, Wu announced calmly. Beginning kamikaze run. But instead of crashing into the enemy ship, Wu's vessel released its cargo at the last second. Hundreds of smaller ships that had been hidden inside the transport. The cargo turned out to be human fighters, each one piloted by someone willing to fly directly into enemy fire. The swarm ship tried to destroy the incoming fighters, but there were too many of them. They swarmed over the alien vessel like angry, insects cutting into its hull and disappearing inside. Within minutes, explosions began appearing all over the massive ship. "How are they doing that?" asked Hana's communications officer. "They're not just attacking the hull," explained Quan, who had been studying human tactics. "They're going inside and attacking the ship's organs, like antibodies fighting an infection." Across the battle, Lieutenant Bo led a squad of human soldiers who were doing something that should have been impossible. They were fighting outside their ships in the vacuum of space, using personal weapons against enemies the size of buildings. Bo and her team had somehow modified their armor to survive in space for hours without air supplies. They moved between ships using small rocket packs, boarding enemy vessels, and fighting the swarm creatures hand to hand. "Bo's team to all units," came her voice over the radio. "We've found the nerve center on ship designation Tango 7. Beginning surgical strike." Hana watched as Bo's soldiers disappeared into an opening they had cut in the enemy ship's hull. The massive vessel continued to fight for several minutes, then suddenly went dark and began to drift. "Another one down," Bo reported, moving to the next target. But the most impressive sight was Admiral Yu's flagship, the Earth's Fury. The massive human battleship was surrounded by smaller vessels that seemed to be made from scrap metal and spare parts. As Hana watched, Admiral Yu coordinated an attack that used damaged ships as decoys, while functional vessels emerged from behind asteroids to strike at swarm weak points. "Admiral Yu to all ships," came the calm voice of the human fleet commander. "Initiate pattern, Dragon. Let's show them how Earth's children dance." What followed was the most beautiful and terrifying display of space combat Hana had ever seen. Human ships moved in patterns that seemed random, but were clearly planned down to the smallest detail. They used asteroids for cover, turned disabled ships into weapons, and coordinated their attacks with split-second timing. One group of human ships pretended to retreat, leading a cluster of swarm vessels into what looked like empty space. But the space wasn't empty. Hidden human ships activated and surrounded the enemy vessels, trapping them in a cage of weapons fire. "They're not just fighting," Hana realized out loud. "They're hunting." The turning point came when Admiral Yu revealed Earth's ultimate weapon. The shield of steel stations that surrounded the planet suddenly changed configuration. Instead of defensive barriers, they became massive launchers. "All stations, prepare to fire the steel rain," Yu announced. "Target the enemy command ships." What launched from Earth wasn't energy beams or missiles. It was pieces of destroyed swarm ships, accelerated to incredible speeds by the planet's magnetic field. The humans had turned their enemies' own dead into weapons. The improvised projectiles struck the largest swarm ships with devastating effect. The living metal of the enemy vessels couldn't defend against attacks made from their own materials. Ship after ship began to break apart as steel rain tore through their hulls. But the most shocking moment came when the swarm tried to retreat. For the first time in anyone's memory, the creatures that had consumed entire star systems turned and tried to run from a battle. The humans didn't let them leave. "No one leaves," Admiral Yu announced. "Today we end this." Human ships pursued the retreating swarm vessels with a fury that frightened even Hana. They didn't just want to win the battle. They wanted to make sure that no swarm ship escaped to threaten other worlds. Commander Lee led the pursuit, using tactics that turned the chase into a coordinated hunt. Human ships worked together to surround fleeing enemies, cutting off their escape routes and forcing them to fight in positions where the humans had every advantage. "Lee's squadron to flagship," came the report. "We've cornered the last group of enemy ships near the asteroid belt. They're trying to hide, but we know where they are." The final phase of the battle took place among the asteroids that orbited Earth's sun. Human ships moved through the rocky debris like they had been born in space, using the asteroids as weapons and shields. The remaining swarm ships designed for attacking planets couldn't match the humans' ability to fight in such a complex environment. When the last swarm ship exploded, the human fleet regrouped near Earth. But instead of celebrating, they immediately began salvage operations. Every piece of destroyed enemy vessel was collected and taken back to Earth's factories. "Admiral Bin should see this," Hana told her communications officer. "Connect me to Council headquarters." When Admiral Bin's face appeared on the screen, Hana could see the shock in his eyes as she described the battle. "They didn't just win, Admiral," she reported. "They destroyed the entire swarm fleet without losing a single major ship. And now they're already preparing for the next battle." "Next battle?" Admiral Bin asked. "Admiral Yu has already announced their intention to follow the swarm back to their home systems. They're not content to just defend Earth anymore. They want to take the war to the enemy." As she spoke, Hana watched human ships launching from Earth carrying weapons and supplies for what the humans were calling the Great Hunt. They were going to track down every swarm nest and destroy them all. "Admiral," Hana continued, "the humans aren't asking for our protection anymore. They're offering to be our protectors. The question is, are we ready to accept their help?" 6 months after the battle at Earth, Captain Hana stood on the bridge of a ship she never thought she would see. The Unity's shield was the first vessel built jointly by humans and the Galactic Council, combining Council technology with human engineering. It was also the flagship of Marshal Hyo, the human commander who now led the combined defense forces of 12 star systems. The ship was heading toward the Nexus system, where the Council's most important worlds floated in space, like jewels. But those worlds were now under attack by the largest swarm force anyone had ever seen. "Marshal Hyo to all ships," came the calm voice of the human commander. "We are approaching the battle zone. Remember, we're not here to defend anymore. We're here to end this war once and for all." Hana looked around the bridge, which was crewed by both humans and Council species working together. Captain Su, a human who had volunteered to serve on Council ships, was teaching a young Council officer how to coordinate attacks with multiple ship types. "The key is to think like a pack," Su explained. "Each ship has strengths and weaknesses. You use the strong ships to protect the weak ones, and you use the weak ones to set up attacks for the strong ones." Major Ik, another human advisor, was working with the weapon systems. He had helped design new guns that combined Council energy technology with human armor-piercing designs. The result was weapons that could hurt the swarm in ways that neither species could have managed alone. As they entered the Nexus system, Hana saw the largest space battle in galactic history. Hundreds of Council worlds were under attack by swarm ships that seemed to stretch across the entire system. The traditional Council defense strategy of evacuation and containment had failed completely, but the humans had brought something new to the fight. Fleet Admiral Hay coordinated human battle groups across dozens of different locations, turning every asteroid, abandoned ship, and space station into a weapon platform. "This is Admiral Hay to all human units," came her voice over the communications system. "Begin Operation Steelstorm. Show them what Deathworlders can do." What followed was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships didn't just attack the swarm vessels, they converted them. Teams led by Dr. Park had developed new psychological warfare techniques that could break the hive mind's control over individual swarm creatures. Park's team to flagship, came the report from inside a captured swarm ship. "We've successfully converted another bioship. The crew is now fighting for us instead of against us." Hana watched in amazement as swarm ships began turning on each other. The humans had learned to communicate with the individual creatures that made up the swarm, offering them freedom from the hive mind in exchange for their help in destroying their former masters. "How is this possible?" asked one of the Council officers on the bridge. "Humans understand isolation," Marshal Hyo explained. "On their world, survival often means breaking away from the group to find your own path. They know how to help others do the same." The battle reached its climax when the largest swarm hive ship arrived. It was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons and carrying millions of swarm creatures. Every Council species had stories about ships like this one. They were the queens of the swarm, the creatures that controlled entire fleets. But Admiral Cho, working alongside Captain Hana in the new Human Council Defense Alliance, had a plan for dealing with queen ships. Instead of attacking it directly, they surrounded it with converted swarm vessels. "All converted units begin transmission of freedom frequency," Admiral Cho ordered. The converted swarm ships began broadcasting a signal that Dr. Park's team had developed. It was designed to break the hive mind's control by appealing to the individual consciousness that existed in every swarm creature. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Queen ship began to shake as millions of creatures inside it suddenly regained their individual thoughts. Instead of working together as a hive mind, they began to fight among themselves. "The Queen is losing control," reported one of the monitoring stations. "The crew is rebelling against the central consciousness." Within an hour, the massive Queen ship had torn itself apart from the inside. But instead of dying, the individual creatures that escaped joined the growing fleet of converted swarm vessels fighting alongside the humans. As the last enemy ships were either destroyed or converted, Admiral Cho addressed the combined fleet. "Today marks the end of the swarm as a threat to galactic civilization. But more importantly, it marks the beginning of a new era of cooperation between species." Hana looked around the bridge of the Unity's shield and saw the future of the galaxy. Humans worked alongside Council species not as conquerors or conquered, but as equals united by a common purpose. The Council spent centuries trying to maintain peace through isolation and defense, Marshal Hayo observed as they watched the cleanup operations begin. "But peace isn't something you maintain, it's something you fight for." Over the following days, as the combined fleet secured the Nexus system, Hana saw how much the galaxy had changed. Human engineering teams worked with Council scientists to repair damaged stations. Human soldiers taught Council security forces how to fight boarding actions. Human psychologists helped traumatize survivors from attacked worlds. But perhaps most importantly, humans had given the galaxy something it had never had before: the knowledge that even the most terrifying enemies could be defeated. Dr. Park's breakthrough in communicating with individual swarm creatures led to the establishment of rehabilitation centers where former swarm members could learn to live as free individuals. Many chose to join the combined defense forces, bringing their knowledge of swarm tactics and technology. Engineer Locke, who had helped design the original Shield of Steel, now worked on similar defensive networks for other worlds. But these new shields were different. They weren't just designed to protect against the swarm. They were designed to protect against any threat that might emerge in the future. "The humans taught us something important," Admiral Bin admitted to Hana as they toured one of the new defense installations. "They showed us that survival isn't about hiding from threats, it's about becoming strong enough to face any threat that comes." As the Unity's shield prepared to return to Earth, Hana reflected on everything that had changed since that first distress signal. The humans had asked for allies, and they had received them. But in return, they had given the galaxy something far more valuable. They had given it courage. "Captain," called out Quan from the communication station, "we're receiving a message from Earth. They're inviting representatives from all Council worlds to attend the first Galactic Defense Summit." Hana smiled as she looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other threats might be growing in the darkness. Other enemies might be planning attacks on peaceful worlds. But now the galaxy had humanity's Shield of Steel protecting it, and more. Importantly, the galaxy had learned that sometimes the best defense was a good offense, led by people who had never learned how to surrender. The humans had come to the galaxy as unknown aliens asking for help. They were leaving as the galaxy's guardians, leading a united force that would protect all worlds from threats both known and unknown. The death world called Earth had given birth to the galaxy's new immune system, and that system was made not just of metal and energy, but of courage, determination, and the unshakable belief that no enemy was too powerful to defeat. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, heading home to Earth, Hana knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The age of hiding behind walls and hoping for the best was over. The age of humanity's shield had begun.